Welcome to episode 3 of From Prison to Pastor. This time, Rich and I have guests. I'm excited. And it's Pastor Rich Genzero. I know his name now. I messed it up last time. And we have invited Anita Davis and Zach Parrish. Zach has been on another show with us before because we are talking about LifeWise Academy. LifeWise Academy is terrifying. It acts like it's teaching this sweet religious Bible school during the school day of public education to young children, and they get off the school building during the day and they're taught this instruction, but the actual instruction is terrifying. It is really messing up public education, and it is popping up everywhere across the country. So let's get into why is this wrong? Why is this scary? Why is it indoctrination of our children? And here we have a pastor. Why is it wrong through many different religions seeing this as a problem? So first I want to thank you all for being here. Anita, can you tell us what is your expertise in this conversation? And thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here. My background is actually I'm a retired educator. I retired with 30 years of experience. Most of that, over half, was at the district level. My specialty was in curriculum development, and I retired as a chief academic officer for Oldham County in Kentucky. So I come from that background of looking, globally at schools, curriculum delivery, instruction. So I became very concerned about this because of that intrusion into the public school day. And so I'm very passionate about this. And because of Zach and others, was able to just learn a lot about LifeWise and then kind of advocate against it in Oldham County schools.
Zachary Parrish is the co-founder of Secular Education Association. You can follow that on all social media platforms. He's been on the show before with his co-founder, Molly Gaines. She's amazing. Zachary, what do you bring to the table? And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, like you said, I'm just the co-founder of Secular Education Association, and I came to this whole fight just as a parent, and I've been fighting it since about 2021. So I've really dug myself in deep and, really kind of got the expertise on the whole thing from front to back about LifeWise and what they're doing, what they're teaching, how it's affecting the schools, how it's affecting the parents, the teachers. This really runs the whole gambit. We always say whatever your issue is with LifeWise, it is valid because there are so many issues that this crosses into.
And you probably more than anybody else across the country really know what you're dealing with, because LifeWise actually made a lawsuit against you when you published their curriculum online. Was it $850,000 lawsuit? Am I getting that right?
I don't even remember. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you.
That's what Christy can do.
It was more money than I had. That's for sure.
Yes. And thankfully some lawyer groups in California stepped in and helped pay for the majority of the bill to fight them and stop them from doing this to you. But you've really fought them. So, anybody saying how sweet and wonderful LifeWise Academy is, when you shine a light on what they're teaching our young children, they sue you. So let's just, and all right, Rich, how are you today? And what do you mainly want to talk about with LifeWise? Because you decided you wanted to bring them on and to discuss this through a religious lens and to have, three different lenses for the show. So what did you want to bring towards this?
Yeah, so I came at this also as a parent. I happen to also be a pastor, right? And someone who is taught at the master's degree level in seminary as an adjunct lecturer. So I come at this from this two-pronged street, like directly with children in the Oldham County, Kentucky school district, and as a pastor and someone who's actually written confirmation curriculums and stuff and teaches children in my church, right? So I took a look at the LifeWise curriculum, the pieces that you can download, and I saw the group that Anita's connected with, Kentucky Citizens for Democracy, and I reached out, just said, hey, I'm a pastor. I'm also a parent. I'm glad, can I be helpful? So that's how I got involved, right? And I think one of the things that just came to mind, right, as a Christian, I'm a Christian and I'm a pastor, and knowing that LifeWise Academy and other groups, right-wing authoritarian Christian groups, file lawsuits against people who want to put information out in public. And I'm reminded of the words of this person who should be important to Christians. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. And in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, if you are taking someone to court, settle with them along the way. And there's really specific instructions from the Apostle Paul in the Bible about Christians participating in what we would say in our contemporary language is frivolous lawsuits. So it deeply concerns me wherever people come from in their walks of life, whether a former educator, a parent like Zach, who sees the dangers of LifeWise Academy, using religion as a tool to structure and organize identity politics for purposes of power. The work of opposing that isn't just to be in opposition, but it's because our community and our society deserves something better. So that's why I wanted us to come together, and I have utmost respect for these two folks who are on a show with us today.
And one of the biggest reasons we're talking about this is most of us just kind of blindly assume we have the separation of church and state. That was what our founding fathers built this country on. If you look at the history of other countries, let's just like zero in on the countries in Europe and how many deaths and wars we have had over a country saying you have to be this specific religion, you have to be Catholic or the Church of England or whatever, and how many people were murdered over this. The reason we have the separation of church and state is a freedom thing, so that each individual people, the families, can decide how we want to raise our children and what beliefs we hold. I send my 3 children to public school. I do not want them to get religious information there other than just a history teaching of different religions and wars and how this is played out and stuff. And if I wanted to send them to a religious school, I could. There are different religious schools very close in my community if I wanted to drive them. And so it seems alarming to me, and we talked about this, Zach, in our last show. They are not targeting families that take their kids to church. They are targeting kids that do not go to church, and they're trying to indoctrinate them their version of Christian nationalism. Zach, do you want to talk any about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's right in their mission statement. They say that they target the unchurched children. They make it very clear that they want to bring this religious instruction to every public school student in the country. They're very open and upfront about who they're targeting and how wide they want to reach this net, right? So,
yeah.
I think it's also important, there's always the argument made when we talk about separation of church and state. The first thing anybody is always going to say is, well, that's not even in the Constitution. So I always like to make the point, maybe that phrase isn't specifically in the Constitution, but the ideas certainly are, right?
And
yeah, that's an important piece. I think it was Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin who wrote that was the intention, though. So, and we do have the non-establishment clause.
Yeah, and the free exercise clause as well. Madison got into it pretty deeply as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think one thing is important to point out, right, is you're going to find in the current Project 2025 people, the white Christian nationalist movement, that they're going to take quotes, particularly, I think it's the Lieutenant Governor of Indiana, are going to take quotes and attribute them to people like George Washington and stuff. But when people who do scholarly research, or even those who understand how to look at primary source material, and for the listener, if you don't know what that is, no judgment, but that is to go back and say, where does this come from, this claim? That those people, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, they did not say those. They're claiming that they said George Washington, for example, is a famous one. His first biographer claims that he said you can't govern without the Bible and Christianity. That's actually not true. So I would just point out too that for those who are seem to be impassioned to force the 10 Commandments on the walls of schools, there is one of them which says, "Thou shalt not lie."
Yeah,
so,
and they're clearly doing that. Yeah, I have seen that. They say those ridiculous quotes saying they're from prominent presidents and founders of our country, and they're made up.
Well, they cherry pick certain things or they twist them. And I always tell folks, one of the best new text out on separation of church and state in the founder's intention. It was released several months ago, and it's called America's Best Idea, the Separation of Church and State. And it's written by an Episcopalian priest, researcher, scholar. And he goes through the history. This is not the first time Christian nationalists have tried to do. We saw, when I say try to do, insert themselves into the schools, into government. After World War II, the Red Scare, there was a push. That's how we ended up with In God We Trust on our currency. Okay. That's when the pledge to the allegiance was changed. It was inserted under God, was inserted after that. During the Civil War, there was a point in time where when the Union was losing, they felt, was it because we did not specifically have something about God in our, and the Confederacy bragged that they did, that they had that. They felt their cause was supported by God and had it in its documents. So this is not new. This is happening again. And I really highly recommend that text because it is brilliant. It's short. It's very easy to read.
What is the text called, Anita?
It's called America's Best Idea, the Separation of Church and State. It is phenomenal. And it's really for lay people who are like, what is this all about? I don't understand it. But you can read that and you're like, oh, wow. Okay. And it also has the counter arguments that Rich was referring to and the obfuscation, lies, whatever. He calls those out in this text and then says, here's where this is. And so it's a very, very good text.
Yeah, that's a great text to read. I really appreciate the author. I do not know that author, but it's Episcopal priest, and it's a great book.
It is.
Thanks for that recommendation. I would one thing that we could do here for a second is we have a claim, right? In the statement here, it says that the LifeWise Academy undermines public education. And so one of the reasons I want to kind of get into that a little bit is to talk about the undermining of public education. So I'd like to toss this off by mentioning something else historical that I think is not common knowledge. The idea of Sunday school. And most of us have heard of Sunday school. Most children that I know are not terribly excited about Sunday school. But let's talk about where did Sunday school originate, and then bridge this kind of into some of the narrative that LifeWise Academy and related groups, Project 2025, and those who are saying that we don't have freedom of choice in our educational system, what they're actually doing here. So here's a brief history of Sunday school. When impoverished children in Great Britain were working, right, as young as 7, 8 years old, some of the churches, particularly Methodist churches, said, whoa, these kids are working. They're not learning to read, they're not learning to write, and they're not learning cipher, which was an old language used to describe arithmetic or mathematics. And so the churches formed Sunday school to teach impoverished working children how to read, write, and do math. Now, they also advocated for an end to those child labor practices. And so Sunday school then morphed as public education began to be supported by a Christian group of people in the country. They understood that for the growth and development of children, learning to read and write and do arithmetic was critical. So Sunday school shifted to religious instruction because of an investment and a political will of the people to have children learning. So that is one of the roots of public education, both in Great Britain and here in the United States, was actually a pushback from churches who developed Sunday school so kids could learn to read, write. Now what we're having done here with groups like LifeWise and the authoritarian rhetoric in the nation and in the states of Indiana, Kentucky, and elsewhere, is to reestablish, a specific brand of Christianity, which is certainly appropriate to say is white Christian nationalism, and is historically accurate to say this is not new It's a new expression, a new name, but it's not new in practice. And they're trying to establish this in the public schools. So this is not actually Bible education. It's not moral instruction. It is indoctrination. Now, Zach mentioned the intentional, now this is directly from LifeWise Academy's website, that they view children who ages 4 to 14 as vulnerable and impressionable mission field and target audience. So to a lot of conservative Christians, this is not going to sound problematic, except for they are using children's vulnerability and impressionability in the absence of parental oversight in a public school institution to push something that they describe as a meta-narrative. And that meta-narrative is to say that the Bible speaks with one voice across time with a single coherent message. Now that, first of all, is not true. Let me tell you, as somebody who preaches every Sunday morning, except for the 4 Sundays that I have off for vacation, from the Bible, okay, that meta-narrative is itself a doctrine. So they're not doing Bible education. They are imposing a doctrine on the Bible to tell the Bible what it's allowed to say and to indoctrinate impressionable people, children, our children, on what the Bible says.
Without letting the parents know what they're being taught.
So what I like to do is shift, since Anita and I have worked together in some really important conversations. So now the next logic of groups like LifeWise is going to be this. Well, it's by consent, though. The parents sign off on this. So I want to kind of hand over to Anita for a minute to talk about the disruption that this causes in the classroom, and how it robs other children who don't go of instructional time, and maybe Zach can follow up in that conversation about related things. So, yeah, Anita, we've talked about this before, you and I. So,
from my perspective, coming in, a school board, a public school board, or any school board for that matter, if you think about it, you have 2 functions, primary functions, a lot of other things, but 2. One is to ensure high quality instructional time. Okay. That's why you exist. And the second thing is the safety and well-being of your children. Okay. Everything else should fall under that somewhere. So when I first looked at LifeWise, I was immediately going, oh, whoa. You're telling me that they're going to be allowed to come in, pull children out, and 1 hour a week. Okay. Some, I think, and Zach can speak to this, I want to say even one state, maybe Iowa somewhere, it was like up to 5 hours. It was something crazy. So you take an hour, pull kids out, remove them from the school, have Bible classes. That is at a minimum 30 hours of instruction lost. 30 hours. And I'm being generous when I say minimum of 30. It's actually, I think, more than that. I think about if someone's gone to college, how many hours did it take to get a credit? Your semester was about 30 hours. I want you to think of it like that if you're someone from that standpoint. But 30 hours of instruction, and I was a teacher for a long time. That is a huge amount of time to lose. And to me, that's taxpayer money. That's taxpayer funded instructional time. Boom, gone. That was just, to me, unacceptable. And if you layer on, you're sending them off with God knows who to learn about God knows what, only because of what Zach did could we even see the curriculum to see what was actually going on. And I have looked at every bit of it. I have gone through every bit of that curriculum. And that's another story, because if I take my curriculum viewpoint and I look at it, unacceptable. The lessons, the assignments, the appropriateness of some of those things, totally inappropriate. So from an instructional standpoint, you're giving up time. It's taxpayer funded time. So that was just something I just had to kind of say, no, this cannot persist. Take also the impact on staffing. If you start pulling out people like that, do you really now need your art or your music teachers or as many PE teachers? There's all these things that kind of have a domino effect with this if you let it in and it starts to grow and pull more and more kids out. Kids, and Zach can also talk to this, if it grows so large, you have kids sitting in a study hall. I don't know about you, but as a parent, I'm not paying my child to go and sit in a study hall while they patiently wait for someone to come back from a religious class. I think that is a lawsuit in the making.
Mm-hmm. I do too.
Really-
I'm a former 5th grade teacher, and whenever my kids would get pulled for something, some sort of the majority of the class would leave, I couldn't teach any new content. And I had so many things to teach, so many standards. How in the world are teachers supposed to get their standards taught in those 180 school days that we have in Indiana if they're getting pulled? Like, I don't want my children to sit in a study hall. I want them learning by these teachers.
Well, and you're paying for that, right? All taxpayers are paying and have that expectation.
Yeah.
The other part, and I don't mention this a lot,
Let's just reiterate real quick that we're talking about elementary students, because the argument is always made, well, I took a study hall when I was in school.
Yeah.
Not in
Kindergartners don't take study hall.
That's a good point, Zach.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Anita.
No, I think, that's an excellent point. The other thing that is not said enough, and as a teacher, okay, it's insulting to act as if teachers in elementary school, especially, and I was a high school and middle school teacher, that we don't teach things to help kids be good people, right?
Oh, that's a good point.
How many of these people went nuts and go crazy about anything called social emotional learning? Well, I'm not too smart, but I dare say most of that can be tied directly back to scripture. Okay. So it's insulting to me as an educator and to my fellow educators that they act as if we are not trying to develop good people. Okay. Because
there's a kindness club in my kids' elementary school.
Exactly. I started a group called the Student Ambassadors, and it was about doing things in the community, right? I wanted them to learn to give back to the community.
Yeah.
And I'm just one little person. I don't know hardly a teacher out there that's not kind, giving, and wanting the best for their students. So that's one aspect of it that just really.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
My two main goals when I was a teacher was getting them to be self-motivated, to want to learn on their own and to look up things on their own, question things. And then the other big thing was empathy, making sure that they cared about their community and other people, that they had a mutual understanding that when we all work towards a common goal of bettering the community, we're all safer. So those were the two things that I really implemented in a majority of my lesson plans.
Yeah. So
while I was teaching them. Yeah.
I think this is really important. To just jump in on this as a pastor, right? So when we were looking at LifeWise's attempt to come to our school district, every time I went to a middle school game, a sports event, or a high school, I started paying attention to the signs on the walls in the school, which gave moral values. Treat one another with dignity and respect. Treat one another as a neighbor, right? Everyone's welcome here in our school. So this will go back here just to say that groups like LifeWise, right, are not trying to do moral instruction. They are trying to provide an indoctrination into a very specific brand of right-wing, white evangelical Christian nationalism. So this is an attempt to create an idealized community. And this is expressed in language like this. Well, and now this has happened to me as a pastor. I've been accused of not being a real Christian or a real pastor. And I've actually, even by a pastor in Oldham County, suggest that I'm passing demonic curses onto my own children.
Oh, wow.
So par for the course. Okay. They put Jesus on a cross, right? Jesus, it's interesting. And again, I want to speak to fellow Christians who might be wondering, like, well, this doesn't sound so bad. Jesus never asked anybody to state a creed, make a confession of faith, or even, I hope I'm not shocking any fellow Christians, but never did he even say, worship me. but he said, "Follow me." And so what Anita's describing among educators, right, is what we call a modeling form of education, that our educators are modeling
Right.
something called community.
Yep.
And as much as it may trouble some of my Christian siblings who are fundamentalists and white Christian nationalists, community is larger than white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Okay? So community is critical. And public education invests in time and money in the learning community, which was the original goal, I want to say, of Sunday school.
Right.
You know,
Zach, did you want to comment on this?
I have lots of thoughts. Yeah, I
Thank you.
think it's important to understand this isn't just a coincidence that all of these schools are already teaching this character development, right? This is a very intentional choice. This is curriculum and, different things. When you talk about the posters on their walls, these are programs they have intentionally built into their day, right? This isn't just a coincidence that all these schools are talking about. This is an intentional choice being made to make sure these values are getting taught to the kids. And that is in every public school district I have ever talked to, walked into. I have thousands of parents in our group that we talk to. This is across the board. They're teaching these, character development qualities of be a good person, care about your community, right? So this isn't something that's missing from public education, just in and of itself. It is already there, and it is intentionally being put in there. You mentioned the doctrine earlier and how it can't be this meta narrative. That is something else that they really lean into about how, we don't get into theological differences. We just teach the Bible as itself. And I'm a former Mormon. I'm a former member of the LDS Church. I'm very familiar with Scripture. I don't see how you can teach any kind of Scripture from a non-doctrine point of view, because every interpretation is different, right? And you've all looked at the curriculum. You see the things like they're teaching. The dinosaurs were on the ark. Not every denomination of Christian believes that dinosaurs were on the ark, right? So they can say that they're not teaching this denominational stuff, but they absolutely are.
They go right against science, right against facts.
But they also go against other religions. Yes. Also, sometimes it's subtle, but as you're reading it, and Zach probably knows this, as you read through and you'll see an assignment. I'll give you an example. One of the assignments or lesson was to study Southeast Asia and the number of Christians and the number of blah, 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 blah. And it would talk about how many Christians were being killed by these people. Okay. So there's this insinuation, right? There's these little things kind of laid out there. And of course, the assignment was to go pray for the Christians in that particular country. It'll be these subtle things written in or provided to the instructors that are counter to how other faiths believe. I mean, not even close. Okay. So it goes to what Rich said. It is representative of a very small, narrow viewpoint. And I grew up Southern Baptist. I was raised in that faith. My father, grandfather, uncles, all deacons in the church. And when I read that curriculum, I just kind of relived.
There's a specific reason why they're targeting 4 to 14-year-olds. We talked a little bit about it, but imagine being one of these kids and becoming older and starting to realize you were told fake propaganda to get you to behave a certain way. And then you've got to unpack that, maybe get therapy. You got to I'm sure, Zach, you can touch on that,
Yeah, but let me say, I'm going to jump in here because what about those children who are, so they're taught, right? For example, that gay people are demonic. Okay. But they're also taught in that the Jews or Jewish people are responsible for the murder of Jesus.
Oh, wow.
Okay. They're also taught, and there's videos of this out there. So I hope that listeners, right, who care about children, and again, I want to speak to my Christian siblings again, but also any Jewish siblings that come on here, Muslim siblings. I have Muslim neighbors, or those who don't have a creed, but are nevertheless, according to my creed, my neighbor, to care about this issue. because what about the children who don't do a deconstruction of what they're taught, and this is really the moral blow, okay, or what I'll refer to as the immoral indoctrination, is that in contrast to what our schools say on the walls, everybody's welcome here, everybody can be a learner, right? That's the learning environment. The learning community is a beautiful thing and can and should be a beautiful thing. Is they're teaching people to be suspicious of others who aren't normal. And so normal begins to be defined as a Mayberry tale, Leave It to Beaver. Women, their role in this form of Christianity is to essentially be breeding mares for the white patriarchy. So I'll give you an example how this plays out quickly. I'm sure Zach wants to jump in, or others, but so Anita and I had talked about the part of the curriculum that talks about that there were adolescent dinosaurs in Noah's Ark. Now, many folks would laugh at this, right? And it is funny, except for people. We're here in Kentucky, right? So the Ark encounter is just north of us. So let me tell you why this is important as an example. So there's a development in the Ark narrative, the flood mythology, okay? It's an origin story. So it's like a type of thing that we can draw on theologically and literarily to say something, right? We give it meaning by what we develop around the story. So developing the story, right, of the Ark as a literal historical event, okay, what that leads to, and using the dinosaurs, the little cute dinosaurs are hanging out with Noah and his 3 sons and their 3 wives. Those characters are critically important because one of Noah's sons in Western European theology is thought to have been cursed. And that curse has been taught in Western Christianity. The indicator of the curse was black skin. Okay, so let me say this again. This idea of cute adolescent dinosaurs, right, on an ark, that's probably like a cute little thing. You could say, it's on a little boat, that's cute. The purpose of that is to help establish an impressionability towards another kind of narrative around that flood story, that some of the people were cursed. And so who are the people who are cursed now? Well, we're not so bold in American Christianity, most of us, as other historical Christian groups. Let me point out that the various iterations of the Ku Klux Klan are white Christian Protestant organizations. Okay, they are Christian organizations, okay? I'm going to say white Christian nationalism holds the same kind of belief system, and they have decorated it and moved away from hoods to khakis and polos and business suits. Yeah. This Ark narrative, all right, is to help establish that one of those descendants, one of humanity's common ancestors, was cursed by God. So who are those people now? And so the language of right-wing Christianity right now is typically not so much about a skin color, but saying, well, they're not the right kind of American or the right kind of Christian. And then it says that in order to be a real American or a real Christian, you must be a real American and a real Christian. And there's only defined in a very narrow viewpoint, right, that centers white Anglo-Saxon male Protestantism at the top.
We call it scaffolding in education.
That's exactly what it is. It is a scaffolding.
What you've just described in educational speak is scaffolding. And in learning, you build and build and build, right? You start off, take reading, okay? And you build and build and build and build. And you have to start somewhere, right? And it's a type of scaffolding towards something else, something bigger.
It's a type of othering people. They're trying to other a bunch of groups and make these children scared of them, and also avoid them and put up a wall around them when they're only listening to certain type of music or watching certain types of shows and reading materials. They're trying to really limit so that they don't see the world accurately. They're only seeing this view and they're very scared.
Yeah, that's
and they're saying the others are wrong. That's right. Like we'll never get.
And it's a lot of sinning talk.
And not just to avoid them, but to convert them.
Right.
That's
Say your friends.
Yeah.
Your friends are going to go to hell if you don't get them to come to these classes. Like
That's scary.
Yes.
That's indoctrination right there.
Yes.
And I think, Zach, help me on this. What the lesson that Rich was talking about in LifeWise about the juvenile, they had to take juveniles because they weren't going to take babies because they couldn't reproduce. And they weren't going to take older ones because they wouldn't reproduce long enough. So obviously they took adolescent dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Okay? But
Obviously.
dinosaurs at that time were as big as bisons.
Yeah.
Okay. That's as big as they ever got. That's being taught, right?
Yep.
And I want you to think about that. That's counter to everything they go back into the classroom. Think about that. And here's the deal. Unless you go into the curriculum and read it, if you just look at the titles of the units, people go, oh, that's nothing. The unit title for that, Zach, it's either patience or perseverance or something like that. Title. And unless you go and read underneath it, what's actually happening, you don't understand. Okay. And that's intentional, right? To have these little generic feel good names that most people go, oh, that's fine. I don't care about that. That's good. That's good. They need to learn persistence. But I want you to think how much disruption that brings back to the classroom.
Because they're getting taught directly different things than what they're learning in the classroom.
They're getting taught something that's opposite. Okay.
Right. That lesson, just for reference, that lesson is lesson 5, right? So this is right in the beginning. We're talking kindergartners right here.
5th lesson of like your kindergartners hearing this story. Wow.
Yeah. And they're being told in some instruction as their walkaway lesson is to go tell the story to a friend, talk to them about Jesus or whatever, and bring them back to class. Okay. Then they're also being told if your parents are not married and they're living together, they're going to go to hell. So I want you to think about that because it doesn't stay in that classroom off campus, right? All that comes right back into my classroom if I'm a teacher or into the school. So people can say, well, the parents choose to let their kids go. Who cares? They get to choose. The problem is that choice impacts the whole school. Okay. And that's the point I don't think people really take seriously enough. Culture, climate, school, kids being bullied, and then the teachers and office staff having to deal with the fallout of all that. And as a person who was an assistant principal for 5 years, it's nightmarish to me to think of this. Okay. Yeah.
And I'm friends with public school teachers in Indiana, and they are struggling as is. And you add this to them, it is a lot. It is a lot. I want to hear Zach's thoughts, and then I want to touch on Charlie Kirk and fear-based type instruction that's happening. But another thing, Zach, do you know how many school systems or counties LifeWise has already impacted? Because people don't know how big it is. They're thinking it might be just a couple. Do you know?
Last time I checked, there were in 1,017 schools actively running programs. Those are programs that have already launched. Those are programs already up and running. They are way more than that in programs that are trying to get launched. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what we should also let Zach talk a little bit about the monetary aspects of this.
Get that too. Yes.
Sometime I pastor a small church, and I'm also going to serve as the director for the Kentucky Council of Churches, right? And so, like many nonprofit service organizations, we're on tight budget, like public school education. We're on a tight budget, and we're motivated to serve, not make money. But there is definitely a money piece. So let's not lose sight of that.
I've even seen a local pastor tell his congregation, "Don't worry about tithing. Give your tithing to this organization." That blew my mind. How much money are you sitting on as a church that you're not worried about the tithing anymore? That was just one example that I saw. I want to go back to what Anita said about how this really does affect everybody, though, because that is one of the biggest talking points, like you mentioned. Just don't sign your kid up. It won't affect them. That is just not true, right? It affects everybody, from the culture that they're bringing back into the school to the kids that are getting left behind, like my daughter was being shoved into a study hall in 2nd grade, right? This really does affect everybody from top to bottom. And it's just really important to reiterate that, because it is always one of the talking points that they have is just don't sign your kid up. It shouldn't bother you. Well, it does bother me when it starts affecting my kid. When Jewish kids are being told they're going to hell and their grandparents are going to hell, when atheist kids are being shoved into study halls, when they're being taught against the STEM teacher, against the biology teacher, against the history teacher, this affects everybody.
Yeah, and let's just jump back on that, right? So the part of the academy suggests that our Roman Catholic, again, as speaking as a Christian, that my Roman Catholic sisters and brothers are not real Christians.
Right. You're not the right type.
Wow.
We're not the real.
Interesting. I want to touch on this real quick while you say that, because this article just came out here in Ohio today. There was actually somebody in Vermilion who went to her Catholic church and said, why are we supporting this? They don't really support us. Why are we supporting that? And she was asked to leave her church and now has to go to a different Catholic church.
Yeah.
That blew my mind. That article just came out this morning.
We need more pastors like Rich, more priests learning about LifeWise. That's why you should go to Secular Education Association. They got a website. They're on multiple social media platforms. Educate yourself and then be one of the leaders saying this is wrong. It's indoctrination of our children, so that doesn't happen and we can work together as a team, because that's terrifying.
We've got a dozen different letters from different clergy members of all different faiths, and we need more of them. So yes, if you're a religious leader, please reach out to us and give us something that we can share publicly.
Yeah, let me say something to my fellow religious leaders, whether you're a rabbi, an imam, or a Buddhist monk, or a fellow Christian pastor of any of our denominations or lack thereof. Don't sleep on this. Many of us of goodwill are really concerned about white Christian nationalism, and part of kind of authoritarianism is to overwhelm the society and the community with just so many things. Let's go back and understand that the tearing down of people's ability to think critically, right, for themselves, to engage in the public sphere with people who are neighbors, right, who have a different last name or whatever, right? That isn't, these are expressions, right, to divide the community, to make suspects out of our neighbors instead of just saying these are our neighbors, right? This is all connected. Okay, you can do the money traces if you want. Project 2020 or Heritage Foundation, right, has sponsored and gave grants to LifeWise Academy, Turning Point USA. They're all sponsored and promote the same mobile mobile phone company and service provider. It's a network that's very organized and very motivated to establish what they believe. And I don't question the sincerity of their belief, okay?
Right.
What they believe is real Christianity in real America. The problem is that this is not moral, it's immoral, okay? We have, and I'll say this to fellow faith leaders, look into this, because this is where folks want to get started in impressionable young people. And I want to push something else. It may make some of us uncomfortable, and I hope it makes some of the audience uncomfortable. When I went to open house when the school year was starting to our local middle school where I have a student, I asked the mental health consultants, I said, hey, if you have a group like this coming into the schools and they're saying that children who have two dads or two moms or gay people are going to hell, or Mormons, the Latter-day Saints are not real Christians, or Catholics, or Lutherans aren't because we baptize babies, or Presbyterians, right? So the list just keeps longer and longer and gets thus more narrow and narrow. That's the intention, right? But my question is this: what do you do when that student comes to you being bullied online, right? What are you going to do when a child takes their own life? And I want to say this to religious leaders, rabbis, imams, Buddhist monks, Catholic priests, whomever. And I know that is an example of that stuff that really actually happens. And some of us have done those funerals and talked to those families. And so this isn't a game. It's very serious. And if we want to have a community where we can bring our kids to school, we already have the threat of gun violence hanging over our heads with so many school shootings. But if we want a learning community where children can learn and grow, I don't need somebody to say, Jesus is my Lord and Savior, to fulfill their human potential. There is dignity and holiness in their growth as human beings, period. I cannot stress that enough. Look to the life, if you're a Christian, of Jesus in the four Gospels and read.
That's something that we hear a lot. I do a lot of public speaking events and different things like that. And that's another one of the biggest arguments I always hear is that, well, there's already bullying in schools. Kids are already bullying each other. Let's not add to that.
Yeah.
Full stop. Like, yes, we all know there's a problem in school and bullying.
Absolutely.
Why do you think we need to add to that?
And listen to people like Anita. She's going to talk right now, right? Who've done this for 30 years. Listen to parents like the three of us. Go ahead, Anita.
Okay. And Sarah, you'll probably understand exactly what I'm saying right now. Kids in a school, whether it be elementary, middle, or high, they bring in, and it becomes part of the culture and interactions of whatever the adults are doing or what is happening outside. Okay. Right now, isn't there something going on where they're using this 6-7 or they're running around? Y'all heard all that stuff.
Right now, schools are banning it. They can't say
it. It just doesn't take much for kids to latch on something and do. They pick up the vibes or whatever also from the adults. So if kindness or being polite or whatever it is what you're modeling and going after, it does have this big ripple effect.
Yep.
But also, if it is bullying and just this anti-whatever, fill in the blank, that also can change and become, terribly the part of the school culture in a classroom.
Right.
And I saw that. I taught in a school where the culture was awful, absolutely awful. And a decision was made to change leadership and to change approach. And this happened within 1 year because the modeling and how the adults approach things and what was happening, culture shifted, away from that cruelty, being mean to one another, blah, blah, to it changed. And what I'm saying is that we have to be so careful what we put out to our kids because they're going to run with it, good or bad. And that's the truth.
And kids are a sponge. They're picking up what's going on. So they're getting this propaganda about how all these people are sinning. They're going to go to hell if they don't also join LifeWise education. It really seeps in to their little brains, and they think that for a very long time until they get old enough to possibly get themselves out, and then they've got to deal with the trauma of what just happened to them. Exactly. So why don't we save them of that? So we talked about how to, if you're a parent and you're concerned about LifeWise, in the show with Zachary, it's a Get the Word Out from a couple weeks ago. I encourage you all to listen to that if you haven't, because we tell what can we do. You can get your kid out of the class if you signed him up at first, you can get him out. But also these classes are being added throughout the year. Grades are being picked up. It's not like it's just every school year they pick up one grade. It's like, it might start with kindergarten, but at the end of the school year, they might be doing first and second, so it moves quick and we need to be prepared. I want to talk before we run out of time about the Charlie Kirk thing. Somebody was saying there's national and state laws that are thinking about being added about a Charlie Kirk holiday or something, a national holiday. Can anybody speak on that?
Well, there's several movements going on that, right? You have some that want to make it a holiday.
All over.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so, one of the things, if you're talking about school, that I think needs to be on the radar is that they want to have turning point chapters be added as a club. Some want to do it during the day. Some want to have it before or after.
And what is turning point? Can someone explain what that is?
It's Charlie Kirk organization.
It's a Charlie Kirk organization. Did he found it?
Yeah, he founded it or ran it. I don't know if he founded it. I think so.
But he ran it. Okay.
Yeah. But it is this very alt-right Christian organization who is pushing these same ideals that we're talking about, very much connected to Project 2025, pushing this, we are a Christian nation and we've always been a Christian nation. We need to be a Christian nation, right?
And it represents a very scary to me because it's very racist.
It's very
racist. And for any school thinking about this, you need to stop and pause. Because not enough people understand what Charlie Kirk said. They'll see little clips of him saying something.
He said a lot. So your spin media can make him out to be a hero or a monster because he said all the things.
It's offensive to anyone that cares about other human beings, I'll just say it that if you care about other human beings who look different than you ought to be concerned about this.
Or believe different than you, right? Like it's just, and you said schools need to take a pause. I think it's really important. This is in theory supposed to be a student-led club, but if you go look at the evidence, they're literally writing checks to get these students to start
Wow.
clubs up. So, they're not student-led, even though they are supposed to be in theory, right? Same thing with this, LifeWise and this release time religious instruction. They are very much leaning into the same regulations of student-led clubs, but that's not what this is. It does not qualify for those same regulations. So that's something else you have to watch.
They're actually using the public schools, which are taxpayer funded. They're using it as their mechanism.
Yes.
We are basically allowing them to subcontract curriculum and kids out for part of the day. Think of it like that. You're just subcontracting it out. It's
That's exactly what the Supreme Court warned against.
Yeah, it's a
Even
curriculum.
when we passed these laws, that's exactly what they warned against happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
so
no one's
part of
willing
it,
to take it on, really. I don't think right now, maybe it's too soon, or the environment. Do you really want something going to the Supreme Court right now about this? You got to think about that too, right? But people are just kind of hunkering down and hoping it passes, I think.
And I just want to point out the fear that's pushing this, because I've had some friends. I lost a friend recently over doing a show on LifeWise, and I was really surprised. And then I had another person push back about how great LifeWise is. And so I just want to point out the side that they're seeing. They're like, this is great. Of course, parents are going to be against it because they're sinning, and we need to protect and save their children. So the things that they see and the things that we see are completely different. And I didn't even know how to speak to this grown man who was really mad at me for doing LifeWise shows, other than trying to say, LifeWise sued my friend that was on the show for just putting the curriculum out. And then he was like, have LifeWise on your show. And you said, or it was either you or Molly, Zach, that said, they won't comment. They don't want you to know what they're doing. It's secret. And when things are secretive and they're pumping them to our children, but they don't want the adults to know, that should have our alarm bells ringing if something is wrong. So, but they're so scared of the violence. They're scared of the division. They're scared of things. And they're using this LifeWise to act like it's going to save us. And we're saying, no, this is more of a problem. It's the opposite of saving.
Yeah,
we don't. The answer to that question is there is more to this than the religious instruction, right? Because we can get into what's being taught, but there are so many more issues. I think Rich can talk about that a little bit. But also, if you do have LifeWise on, please call me. I would love to have that dad with them.
Come on, Rich too. I bet.
Yeah, LifeWise, you're welcome to join a project next show.
Absolutely.
We have invited them many times on many platforms, and they just will not engage with us.
Rich, maybe we can invite the Kentucky director to join us.
Well, I mean, glad to have conversation. So one of the things that I've said is I don't participate in language as a Christian that goes and says that other Christians aren't really Christian. Now that might sound, altruistic, right? I do not participate in that language. And the reason why is because I know all too well that LifeWise Academy, the Ku Klux Klan, Turning Point USA are all expressions of a deeply rooted Christian tradition. In the same way we can go back to the Crusades, okay? And I think I mentioned something about the Fourth Crusade. After the division of the Western and Eastern churches, the Latin Crusades, they made a pit stop in Constantinople to kill those other bad, not real Christians on their way to conquer the Holy Land for Jesus. So I don't participate in language that these are not real Christians. I think they're absolutely real Christians. They're well established within the trajectory and history of Christianity in the Western world. And that is a type of scaffolding that Anita was trying to kind of build on in educational language. And what that means is that the establishment of a particular religious indoctrination, right, provides the scaffolding or the lens through which we view other people. So our indoctrination, our doctrines, our teaching inform us about other people instead of relationships with other people.
Right.
And so the two structures, or the two major structuring categorizations of society, or tools, is race and religion. Race and religion to categorize, structure, and create a hierarchy among people. Except the problem is this, that I'm also within a tradition of Christianity that actually takes Jesus very seriously, who says a lot in Matthew 25 about how you treat immigrants or refugees, prisoners, poor people, widows. Jesus, who meets people on a mountain and talks about blessed are the poor. And then will later say, woe to you who are rich. It's a different tradition within Christianity. Jesus says, that the message is for all people, not limited. So there's a lot that we could say about that. We've got a couple minutes left. I think one of the pieces that I'll just mention again as a Christian minister, right, is in terms of a LifeWise Academy or a Turning Point USA, it doesn't matter if it's named the Zoology Club. One iteration or another of this kind of expression of Christianity and religion has always been around. It will continue to be around. This is the new brand, the new marketing, right? And it's serious because, it takes a parent like Zach who's simply saying, I need to look at this and I want other people to see it, and then literally sues him. A national nonprofit corporation sues a parent for saying we need to examine this curriculum.
And they're not going to stop at me. Don't think that I'm going to be the only lawsuit. They have already threatened to sue Neola, the policy writing arm in Ohio. They've already threatened to sue Columbus City Schools in Ohio. And they're currently fighting out in the state of Washington right now, threatening to sue a school district there. That's one we're watching very closely.
Yeah.
But, again, there's so much more to this than just the religious part of it.
Yes.
I know, that's kind of your perspective, but we can also look at this from the safety issue and how they're taking these kids off site. That is so important here to think about.
They're taking them off site, and it's not approved by the school, the adults that are teaching the class. It's approved by LifeWise. So we don't know if
they're not screened. They're not screened, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Not by the school. All right. They're screened by the local LifeWise director. But even that, the buildings themselves, are they up to fire code? Are they up to the safety standards? Are they locked doors the way that we have in our public schools? I promise you they're not, because we've seen the pictures. We've done the research. We see them having these classes in gun clubs. We see them having these classes in people's garages, right? We have board meetings or like county commissioner meetings where they're going to the county commissioners trying to get their personal house rezoned so that they can bring these kids there for these classes.
I think the other part of that goes with it, I want you to think about it. I go back to, I said that schools, boards should be taking care of instructional time and school student safety, right? Liability. I want you to think about what Zach just laid out.
Yep.
As soon as I, once again, go back to when I heard about LifeWise, I'm thinking, oh my God, the liability. Well, people want to go, well, that's on LifeWise. No, it's not. People are naive if they think that something happens and they're going to go sue LifeWise, which, Zach, am I right? Don't the parents sign off saying they're not going to sue LifeWise?
Not anymore. They used to until we raised awareness about that.
Good job.
That liability waiver.
Yeah, so they did have it, and they, I guess, taken off. You're going to come to.
So we made a big deal about it. That varies in every state, though, too. But like in Ohio, it says the sponsoring entity must have liability. When we're talking about Washington threatening to be sued, they don't have that in their state law. There is nothing about who carries the liability. Yeah. But the bottom line is the schools always have the liability, right?
They will, because the deep pockets they'll come after. And here's the other angle I tell people to think about, okay? Are the school districts, because they're signing off on this, think about the insurance carrier. If you're the insurance carrier for that district and you come in and you're telling me you're allowing the kids to go off campus and come back, what would your insurance carrier do to your premiums? They'd raise them. Who pays for that? Taxpayers. And so as you delve and deeper into this, you do see everybody's impacted by this choice. Everybody. And as it grows and things start really happening, the first parent who takes this on and sues, who are they going to sue?
Everybody.
The district.
Everybody.
Yeah. They're going to sue the district, right? Who's paying for the district's representation?
Taxpayers.
So if you see, they say, we're taking them off, we're paying for it all. No, you're not. No, you're not.
It's going to come back and hurt us, hurt our children, hurt our parents.
Let me put this in perspective, right? Because, and this isn't to overemphasize a religious piece, but it's a religious entity, right? A fellow Christian entity pushing this, right? So and I know this from personal experience, when a church wants to build a playground or something, right? That's sounds pretty, innocent, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to get in the church, we have to get independent insurance coverage over that, or like whatever carrier we might have, we have to add that to our policy. And if we open that up, right, to the public, then the insurance premiums increase annually by $2,000 to $5,000.
Huh.
Now, let me just add some other very specific real information, right, to this. Who are the people that are the most often convicted of types of child abuse and stuff like that? It's the places that groups who want to take children out of the school setting, into another setting, an unscreened setting, right? It's the same groups of people. So I'm not asking people to be afraid. What I think the four of us I think are trying to do is let's put the window shade up here.
Yes, let's shine a light on this.
The same way, like Zach said, hey, let's let the light in on the window on this curriculum. Let's tell this used to be, or is used sometimes as a Christian idea. Let's tell the truth. Can we be honest? Now, those are moral values that don't require me to believe in the Nicene Apostles' Creed, the Athanasian Creed. Sorry, I'm going to get a little preachy. But truth and honesty, when they are presented as indoctrination, are not those things which hold us accountable and hold a mirror up to us that make us face our own lying that we all do sometimes. But they are used as tools. So I think one of the things we have to wrap up, right, is to say a lot of language right now that's being pushed is that we don't have freedom of choice in our schools, and the type of freedom that they want to have, right, is the freedom to oppress and establish a indoctrinating type of Christianity. Now they will point to various data studies and other things that they have funded or had Heritage Foundation or
lied, misled.
Fund. Mm-hmm. And so I want to say again to fellow Christians or who maybe are engaged with this or supporting this, whatever, they are lying.
Yeah, that research study is the prime example of that, right? It is not a research study. It is a marketing study. Right. It wasn't Heritage Foundation. It was Ambassador Enterprises. It's actually out of Fort Wayne here that paid for this study, but that is also one of their biggest investors. They claim this is this independent study while it's simultaneously being paid for by one of their biggest investors.
Yeah.
We actually have a nice rebuttal to that study on our website if anybody wants to look into that a little bit more.
So check that out on the website, Secular Education Association. It's
everybody. We're finishing up here. If you don't follow Secular Education Association, please do that. And you can also get like newsletters and things too, can't you? I think, you guys are very well organized. I just want to thank you, Zach and Molly, for all that you two do.
Yeah,
it's not like you're getting paid for this. You're working so hard to shine a light on LifeWise and other organizations that are really indoctrinating our children across the country. This is scary. We need to shine a light on it and stop it. I want to thank Rich for getting Anita and Zach on today and for using your show to talk about this. We have 2 other shows about LifeWise if you want to know more information. The second episode, the one with Zach and Molly, really goes into the curriculum, how to stop it, the money. There's a lot more information there you can get with it. But if you're listening and you care about this, let everyone know. Not everybody's going to watch this show. Not everybody's going to follow Secular Education Association. Let everybody know. Teachers, pastors, priests, principals, superintendents, school board members. Those are the ones that need to know first, and make sure that they don't just blindly believe the propaganda. We cannot blindly believe things without question when it's religion and our children and our young children in public schools. We have to stop and examine this and do what we can to protect them. It's going to be a rough I don't know how long we're going to have to fight them until we can get some laws changed. It's going to be a rough few years fighting this, and we will keep doing our part at Project Next to let everybody know, but you guys can do your part too and just telling everybody, because when I first started just a few months ago, I had never heard of LifeWise. Now I feel like more people are becoming aware, so let's just keep it going. Thank you, you three. Please share the show wherever you're at. Send it to a parent or anybody that's involved in education or religion to get the word out about LifeWise. And you guys, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it. I know you all are busy. It's nice to meet you, Anita. It's nice to see you again. Yeah.
Thanks
Bye,
for
everybody.
having us on. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Remember, build community, not hate.
That's right.